The Caribbean region has a historic relationship with European powers. Indeed, the development of the Caribbean has been intertwined based on consistent structural influence from different European countries over the centuries. One can thus conceptualize this evolution as a historic inevitability. For the past 41 years, the EU has defined its relations with the Caribbean as part of the ACP, the African, Caribbean and Pacific group of states. This relationship is bound in the legally binding Cotonou Partnership Agreement. On the 15th of October 2008, the CARIFORUM and EU countries were the first to sign a comprehensive economic partnership agreement changing trade relations between the EU and the Caribbean from one based on preference to one based on reciprocity and free trade. Karel de Gucht, former EU Trade Commissioner, recognized that the economic fundamentals of the former preferential trading system failed ACP countries and they were increasingly marginalized in world trade. The idea behind the EPAs was to integrate the ACP countries in a WTO-compatible agreement. This brings us to our first two lessons. Lesson 1. For critics of the EU approach, the WTO argument does not sell due to the incoherencies of Article 24 as an article designed for developed groups and not developed developing groups. Lesson 2, it also reflects a cognitive failure between the two camps of EU and ACP officials. Our third lesson is on regional integration itself. In the Caribbean, the CARICOM, the Caribbean Community, is the regional organization of the Caribbean. However, its process of regional integration has been described as slow, even on pause, and this can impact EPA implementation. Why is this important? Well, if there isn't strong regional integration, the economic partnership agreement based on regionalism could fail. However, interestingly, the agreement was signed between CARICOM and the Dominican Republic to make the new CARIFORUM group. The CARIFORUM group, which combines CARICOM and the Dominican Republic, can incentivize regional integration in the Caribbean, and this was the main driving force behind a trade agreement bringing the two together. In fact, it is deeper than the existing free trade agreement between CARICOM and the Dominican Republic. Despite an economic rationale for integrating CARICOM and the Dominican Republic in the CARIFORUM grouping, there are notable political tensions between the two in the region. This was seen post-negotiations, where the negotiators in the CARIFORUM side were criticized for acting too autonomously and having been financed by the EU. This brings us to our fourth lesson. In 1972, Walter Rodney wrote the book How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. This serves as an important lesson of the dialectic between development and underdevelopment that has marked EU-ACP relations. This is directly linked to our Lesson 5 on policy coherence for development. The EU's new agenda for change has been criticised since the Caribbean region, except for Haiti, will no longer be eligible to receive development cooperation funding due to the agenda for change's new principle of differentiation. This has led to criticism, which leads us to our Lesson 6, that there needs to be consultations with civil society organisations. And indeed, in the CARIFORUM case, 2 meetings of the Joint Consultative Committee have taken place in Brussels. However, many key lessons have to be learnt. One of the key issues in the Caribbean case is on the octroi de mer, which are dock duties applied in French Caribbean territories. Indeed, these dock duties, in the CARIFORUM Consultative Committee perspective, hamper regional integration. Another key issue that has been on the agenda is the Caribbean's relations with Latin America in the CELAC grouping. These relations, indeed, could strengthen and take over ACP relations beyond 2020. While the CARIFORUM EU EPA is a special mega-regional trade agreement between countries of the Global North and the Global South, CARIFORUM countries, amongst other ACP and developing countries, are worried about implications of other mega-regional trade agreements such as TTIP. As the current legally binding Cotonou agreement between the EU and the ACP states comes to an end in 2020, the European Commission launched a public consultation on the future of these relations and how it should be structured beyond 2020. The European Commission released its vision for a renewed partnership with the African, Caribbean and Pacific states in 3 separate pillars for the A, the C, the P states respectively, and an umbrella agreement which can also include North African countries and other small island developing states. While the EU is redefining its relations with the African Caribbean, these states are also redefining their relations with other partners beyond the EU, such as China, the BRICS, and of course, Brexit will impact future global relations. Indeed, China offers a new model of development based on economic development, which compares to the EU development based on political development. This is important going forward for ACP countries, especially for the African continent, which all too often we forget that Africa is not a country. This leads us to our 7th and last lesson, that there are several models of development. Indeed, Sir Shridath Ramphal, former Secretary General, wrote, "The challenge that faces developing countries is not merely the challenge of economic development, but the fact that in failure lies a danger of returning to a new dependency, a new kind of colonialism deriving from economic weakness. Therefore, future relations should be based on economic development."